It's just bad tactics from Zahawi that he happened to try his heavy-handed legal approach on someone, me, who had resources, had lots of legal, finance, commercial media contacts. And he was really outgunned by me rather than vice versa. Most of the time, the tactics he employs work. And most of the time, people who use our libel system can silence those who are trying to expose them.
Dan Neidle is the man whose own investigations into Nadhim Zahawi's taxes, for which he was threatened with legal action, started the ball rolling, a scandal that has now cost Mr. Zahawi his job in the government. Dan joins me now. Dan, good afternoon.
Hi.
What's your reaction to the news of the sacking of Mr. Zahawi?
I think at each stage of this, I've underestimated quite how far from the truth Mr. Zahawi departed. I thought I was looking at a man who hadn't paid tax and was trying to run away from it. I had no idea at that time he'd gone to HMRC and was trying to settle it. Then I thought that I believed his statement that he didn't know about this until he became Chancellor. I thought it was my work that alerted him to it. But now we find out from Sir Laurie that Zahawi knew about the investigation since April 2021. So it's hard to know how to respond to someone who has given statements to the press denying he was under investigation when he knew he was, threatened the Independent. He said, I will 100% take legal action, he said to the Independent over that. He told me through his lawyers he wasn't under investigation, his taxes were fine, he had no interest in an offshore trust. None of these things were true. I don't think of myself as a naive person, but I had no idea that a senior politician could say things that were just not true and take legal action or threaten to take legal action on that basis. To me, it's extraordinary.
Going forward, Dan, do you think that we need to change perhaps how ministers are obliged to declare their tax affairs? I mean, we keep hearing, look, the tax affairs of ministers are like every other citizen of the country. They're private. They're between them and the tax man. But when it comes to holding office, and especially one of the big offices of state, should different rules apply to ministers, do you think?
I think we need to be careful to not have a witch hunt and not pillory people for making innocent mistakes on tax and having disagreements with HMRC, which happens all the time, and it's not necessarily anything wrong with that. But I think probably there should be a system so that if a minister has a penalty for carelessness from HMRC, I think that is something that should be reported at least to the Cabinet Office and perhaps to the public.
You've put out a substantial Twitter thread this morning, also sort of really shedding light on how the case came about. You also credit a lot of other journalists and publications who were not completely in the dark and were actually shedding light, so sort of almost like a team effort. But you do talk about the HMRC and their conduct in this issue. Can you just shed a little bit of light? Was the HMRC confused a little bit, particularly when freedom of information requests were coming in from yourself and other journalists? Did they give the correct information out at the correct time?
I think they did. I think that is a very complicated mess, but I don't believe HMRC acted improperly, and I think it's most unlikely they did. But there's a point I do want to make, if that's okay, which is that a lot of people look at this as a David versus Goliath story, and it's a heartwarming story of how one person went out. It's nonsense. It's just bad tactics from Zahawi that he happened to try his heavy-handed legal approach on someone, me, who had resources, had lots of legal, finance, commercial media contacts. And he was really outgunned by me rather than vice versa. Most of the time, the tactics he employs work, and most of the time people who use our libel system can silence those who are trying to expose them. So the real lesson here, I think, the thing that's gone wrong isn't tax. It's not HMRC, it's not cabinet procedures. The real thing wrong here is libel law and how it can be used by the powerful to silence people who criticise them. That's where I'd like the focus to be.
And Dan, finally, before we go, are you looking into any other members of Parliament and their tax affairs?
Normally, my focus is on much more boring and I think important tax policy questions, but there is a story coming out in a few days about an MP who, on a much smaller scale, has questions which are not totally dissimilar to those you were asking Mr. Zahawi back in July 22.
I don't suppose you can give us a clue.
Not a Conservative MP.
Okay. Dan Neidle, I think that's all I'm going to get out of you, the identity of this MP. Thank you so much.